I sometimes get into this dreamy phase where the start of a project is this big, glamorous Barbie's dream house where I get to do this, I get to do that, I get to put this, I get to add that. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I get delusional and start to think, oh, this is the project where I finally get to use that material. And this is a project where I finally get to take out that design sketch that I had hidden in my vault. And all of my design dreams are going to come true. And suddenly these aspirations starts to snowball down into a punch in your face. No, because reality sets in, budget gets real, and the next thing you know, I'm broke. I don't want to be broke. I can't afford to be broke. I'm not going to be broke because I'm a reasonable adult and responsible professional. This is what kind of happened when I had to relook the fireplace design. So let's take a look. Let me think about what's been happening for the past couple of weeks. There have been site visits in the cold rain, design changes, windows are scheduled to be delivered later this week. I've also finalized finish selections, which always seems like a big milestone. And a couple of weeks ago, all of the interior partitions received bad insulation, and the house is now ready to receive drywall. Drywall should be going up soon, which is great because it's been delayed for a couple of weeks. And yes, because of the delay, some of the insulation has been partially exposed to wet weather, which I know it's not ideal and it's not good practice. I want to go back to the bad insulation because you're probably thinking, Annette, you're insulating the entire house. Isn't that a little overkill? And the answer is it's very intentional. You have no idea how many situations I've been in where the walls are paper thin and you could hear everything. I mean, every single thing. There are different ways to deal with sound mitigation, but this was the most cost-effective solution for me. The absolute worst is when you could hear everything that goes on in the bathroom when it's occupied. No one wants that. I want the renters to have privacy and not hear things that they don't want to. I typically go to Hawthorne on Thursdays, but this week my Thursday was a little bit busy, so I'm going today. It's Friday, 10:30 in the morning. The weather is overcast, which is not very typical, but it's still lovely. The drive down there to the project site is usually very nice. It was a long drive here. It's a little bit wetter here than I thought it would be. It was sprinkling for quite a bit, which was a little surprising, but a little cold too. So I just had my conversation with the superintendent, and we had talked about a couple of the updates that's been happening. Nothing really in terms of the construction. The house has been pretty much the same from the last week that I've been here, but him and I were going over a couple of the design decisions and the detailing that's going to be happening specifically in the living room and the primary suite. So one of them being this right here. So this is the fireplace at the end of the living room. And I had initially wanted to have the CMU sandblasted off so that the existing material could be used as the finished surface. But it sounds like after his conversation with the subcontractor that there's just too many layers of paint that's been applied over the years. So having that sandblasted is going to take a little bit too much time and it's not going to yield the result that I'm looking for. Because I'm basically wanting that sort of like gritty aggregate finish that you get with sandblasting a masonry block. But again, based off of his conversation, it seems like that's not going to be happening with that. So I'm going to have to pivot and come up with a different design on how to strategize this fireplace area. I guess I do have a couple of other ideas that I could explore, but I am a little bit disappointed because I thought having that, be sandblasted was going to be a really nice finish and nice feature to the house, but it's okay. We could pivot and try to explore something else. I'm back at the workspace. It's Tuesday, February 17th, which is Lunar New Year's. So for those who celebrate, happy Year of the Horse. So as you know, I'm Korean American and I typically celebrate both the solar and lunar new year, which is great because that means I get 2 times the amount of rice cake soup every year, which is one of my absolute favorite meals to have. I wanted to come back to the drawing board today since it's the New Year's and all and revisit the fireplace situation. Because as you know, I went to the site last Friday, had my slightly disappointing conversation with the site super, and wanted to strategize what I'm doing exactly with the fireplace. So I'm here. I am prepping my desk area so I could explore a couple of options. And I want to walk you through 2 options that I have for that. And while I'm at it, I want to also give you a little bit of a detailed explanation of what's happening in the kitchen. So let me walk you through exactly what that means. I'm getting my tracing paper set up for option 1 of the fireplace design, but before I dive into that, I want to give you some background on the ridge beam. The house was designed to receive this new beam, the line that I'm drawing here, and a photo here, to emphasize a continuous ridge line throughout the entirety of the house. To make that happen, I demoed the bedroom wall right here on the left that faces the living room and rebuilt it about 5 feet back, slightly reducing the bedroom size. What I'm drawing now is a new column to support the beam since it's a long span. The next column is hidden in the wing wall in the kitchen. I love how this column is here to do one job, which is to support the beam. There is something about a freestanding column in a space that's unobstructed and doing its thing that makes a space feel poetic where it's expressing its building tectonics. Another column is added at the end of the beam by the masonry bearing wall. This wood column is planned to be exposed. That original wall was load-bearing and supported the roof in this portion of the house. But after further study, it was discovered that the existing beam was undersized by current building code and a new engineered beam was introduced in its place. The fireplace has an existing masonry hearth that will be reused, possibly cladding it with a new ceramic tile finish. I'm into creating textures and volumes, so here I'm building out a shallow floor-to-ceiling fireplace surround and thinking this could be a textured surface, something like a Venetian plaster or textured cement finish. Before I commit, I'll have a mock-up prepared. I'll share that in a later video. To the left, I'm planning to insert plywood panels, which would be the same material as the wood ceiling above. What's really going to make the space pop are the plywood slats for the ceiling finish. And hold that thought. I'll get back to the ceiling later in this video. A lighter toned wood with beautiful graining that's clean and eye-catching without overwhelming the walls to complement the textured surround with accent paints would work so beautifully at this end of the house. Transitioning to a jazzed up rendering of option 1, boom. Let's get back to the finished wood ceiling. Plywood is a recurring material I'm using throughout the house, in the living room, kitchen, dining, bedroom. To give you a better idea of what I'm going for, here are a couple inspiration images of the plywood interiors. Lovely, right? I'm taking the plywood, having them cut into 3-inch wide strips, and laying them on the wider side with a 3/4 gap between them. Behind the plywood is a black fabric shown earlier in photos, which holds the roof insulation in place and creates that clean black reveal between the wood slats. Here's a photo of the plywood sample, and I talk more about this later in the video. Back to the Venetian plaster. How beautiful will the fireplace be if this level of quality can be achieved? Reference images here, here, and here. And finally, a barn door to enter the bedroom to the left. I've designed a barn door on a previous project and I loved the way it turned out. It added so much character to the space. This second option is a dressed up version of option 1, where the fireplace becomes more functional. The idea here will be to maintain a consistent finish along the hearth and fireplace surround. I am building out a surface for the hearth to receive that same Venetian plaster I had mentioned in option 1. A slight projection at the fireplace surround will receive the same finish as the hearth below. Here, I'm reducing its width and centering it on the wall to carve out space for 2 simple floating shelves on the right for books, decor, or firewood storage. The remainder of the wall will receive plywood panels, which is the area to the left and right of the fireplace and the far left past the column. The colored rendering here that's transitioning this frame allows you to feel the depth of textures, materials, and also the volumes. The textured plaster wraps continuously from the hearth to the surround, creating a single, uninterrupted material line. That surface is then juxtaposed with the warmth of the plywood, framing the fireplace, and extending that material language from wall to ceiling. I haven't decided which option to go with. It really depends on who's available to help build these ideas. And cost is a factor because this was not in the original design intent. Is that scope creep? Here's a quick story about the beam where there was a huge faux pas. The original ridge beam was a 2x12 made from dimensional lumber. Once the renovation loads were recalculated, the existing beam simply couldn't support the new structure and needed to be upgraded. I opted for a 5.5 by 13.5 glue lam, and glue lams are basically multiple layers of dimensional lumber laminated together with the grain running parallel. There was, however, a big hiccup. The wrong size beam was delivered to the site. Seriously? Do you know what made things worse? The man managing the construction at the time thought it could be remedied by literally attaching the missing length to the end of the glue lam. That does nothing structurally. You're essentially adding a decorative piece to the end of a structural beam. Thankfully, the story ends well. The corrected size was re-delivered. Now back to the kitchen. The island here is used for washing and prepping with a seating element for socialization. Directly behind the island on the back wall, you'll find a cooking area with food storage components. I typically like to add upper cabinets to a kitchen for more storage, but for this project, I like to explore a blank, unobstructed upper surface with a clean and minimally detailed base cabinet. I'll add 2 floating shelves on opposing ends and another one in the dining room for design continuity. I'm planning to use plywood here as well, so these shelves would be a nice element to get those layered edges expressed. An exposed hood anchors the center of the composition. A consistent horizontal datum line is established and carried across the shelves and hood. The finish right below the shelves are planned to be a wall tile. One that I've been eyeing is a clay zellage tile that's neutral with a slight sheen. I'm into its perfectly imperfect appearance with varying tones and textures, but I'm still exploring other options. The area to the left is planned to be a built-in refrigerator tower, finished with the same plywood as the ceiling. I'm building a fixed wall cabinet directly above the fridge to act as a cap, because I really dislike dead spaces above fridges. Aesthetically, it's unresolved. The kitchen island will be designed with beautiful exposed plywood edge detailing, with a smooth to the touch velvety plastic laminate countertop and coordinating vertical surfaces. The living room side will be open to allow for seating, and the right will have drawers for storage. The sink is located on the island, so you could wash and prep your food while overlooking the living room. The range is directly behind the sink on the back wall. As you're standing in front of the sink, there is an open shelf for the microwave to your right. Do you know that feeling you get as a designer where you're always constantly looking and studying, tweaking and refining, almost being obsessive until you feel like you have the best option? Something about this kitchen still felt unresolved, so I recently had a thought to extend the plywood cladding to the recessed back wall above the tile line, as well as onto the adjacent right wall and ceiling. By doing so would allow the back wall to read as a singular, built-in plywood volume, creating a cohesive and resolved composition. What do you think? Let me show you a couple of the finished samples I'm thinking about using for the ceiling and wall panel in the living room. Zoom up close, you could see the texturing and then the wood grating pattern on these are really beautiful. So you flip it over. This one is a 7-ply South American radiata pine plywood, which I love because it has that cleaner and whiter look as opposed to the traditional Southern pine plywood that has that yellow cast. This is an AC grade, grade A on the front, grade C on the back, sanded on all 4 sides. And with plywood, it typically comes in grades A, B, C, D, with A being the best and D being the worst. In terms of price, these are really affordable. So you're looking at about $50 for a 4x8 sheet, which if you do the math, it comes out to be less than $2 per square feet. I really like this as an option. I was drawn to this plywood because the species had a few and small knots, but what was even more interesting was that the texture was so lovely, where the large and bold green patterning reminded me of something I see in a watercolor where things are feathery and flowing and ethereal. So when you have that applied to a vertical surface, it'll really elevate the space, give it a nice texture without feeling very overwhelming. So let me show you this one. You could kind of see all of the variations, the big and bold patterning. And when you have that applied, it'll give it just a nice little texture and, make the space really look nice. The biggest update this week is the CMU sampling. So we had one of our guys come in and do a test area to see how the CMU sandblasting finishes will look. So he tested it in the backyard. We have a partial height CMU wall back there. He didn't want to do it inside the house because just in case it didn't end up turning out the way we wanted to. If you sandblasted once, it's permanent. He did it here. Let me show you. There's 3 different areas. He did a light, medium, and dark grind, and they turned out so well. So let me zoom in a little bit closer. You can see the light, that's the medium. You start to see more of the texture and the aggregates come through. But what I love the most is this one right here. So that's the heaviest grind, but look at all that texture and detail. I'm so excited because I've been waiting for this for so long. And it just ended up coming out so much better than I had thought. So I'm really happy. So we're gonna go with the darkest grind, and it's gonna go inside that house. We'll see the finished product in hopefully a couple of weeks. That's really the biggest update with the house. The sandblasting samples over there. In terms of the actual house, there's no work that's been happening on the inside. It's been sitting like this for a couple of weeks. But next week, there's going to be a lot going on. Windows, doors, drywall. So by this time next week, the house should be a lot more finished and complete, and no more of this pinkness that you see in the back. We made it to video number 3. Wow. Woo! For someone who hasn't made videos, this is a huge milestone. So I'm so happy that I made it to video number 3. And I hope everyone is enjoying everything you're seeing so far.